at first what happens within us is we feel attacked in some way, or we feel threatened in some way, and we feel this need to protect ourselves or defend ourselves. And when we can just start to notice and become aware, okay, that's what's happening right now for me. I'm feeling really attacked. I'm feeling that I need to react in like a more challenging kind of way, right? That awareness is your first step. It really is like the cue to know, okay, now what I need to do, I need to pull in a practice that's going to be able to help me calm that sensation.
Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. It's such a delight to have Cynthia Kane on the show today, talking about things that are really important, how we communicate, mindfulness. Cynthia, I just admire your work so much. You have a series on how to communicate like a Buddhist, talk to yourself like a Buddhist, how to meditate like a Buddhist. You have a daily Om course. You have a communication training program. You're a certified instructor, meditation, mindfulness, breathing coach. And you have a new book, The Pause Principle. These are all things that are always important that we sometimes put on the back burner because we're so busy in the hustle and bustle. But I would argue right now is something we really need to be in tune with and pay even more attention to, because we get all of this negativity coming in from all over the news, what's going on in the world. So that's my very long way of saying thank you so much for being on the show today.
Happy to be here. I really am. Thank you.
Of course, I would really love to hear how you got interested, intrigued, engaged in communication and mindfulness.
Yeah. So it wasn't something that I thought that I would do, like when you're 5 or 6 or even 12. I didn't think that I would help people communicate in a kind, honest, and helpful way. It really came about for me in a really roundabout way. I was extremely passive aggressive and very judgmental, and like the queen of slamming doors, shutting down, walking away. I had a really challenging time expressing myself, and just, silence was really challenging for me, and very caught up in kind of future thinking and worrying. And, sometimes I get really stuck in my past thinking of like nostalgia and sadness and all those things. And I would see other people who looked like very, they were having like very calm interactions, very relaxed conversations. They were really enjoying being in relationship with other people. And I just thought, well, that's them. That's not me. This is kind of how I interact. This is how I engage. I didn't know at the time that it really is a learned practice. And I didn't find that out until I lost my first love very unexpectedly. And that really threw me into trying to figure out how to enjoy living in the world and how to be here in a way that felt really fulfilling and felt really good. And so at that time, I was really searching to find a way to feel better. And that's when I took a lot of courses. I was reading lots of books. I was going to a lot of seminars, doing all the things. And a friend of mine introduced a meditation and writing seminar that was going on at the Shambhala Institute when I lived in New York. And that was where I was introduced to mindfulness, introduced to Buddhism, introduced to the elements of right speech. And when I heard those, which are to tell the truth, don't exaggerate, don't gossip, use helpful language, I thought, okay, this is it. Like, this is my way out of the suffering that I was in. And I woke up understanding that meditation was helping me, but I couldn't really understand why. I didn't know much about any of it. And so that really is when this lifestyle experiment began, where I started to really pay attention to how I was communicating with myself and then with others and then my environment. And then, I wanted to dive more into meditation and mindfulness because I was just seeing how it was totally changing the way that I was interacting in the world, right? The world used to be, I mean, Einstein had that question, which is like one of the most important questions you can ask is the world, a safe place, or is the world a scary place? And to me, the world was a very scary place before. And then once I started in this mindfulness, path and communicating differently and meditating, the world became a friendlier place. And so I got here in a very roundabout way. And then, it kind of grew from there because I started writing about it and, the books came and then the courses and the training programs. And it wasn't just me who was experiencing a lot of changes with shifting the way, I was communicating, but others were too. And it's just been really amazing to see, the changes, not only in my life on a day-to-day basis because of these practices, but, for others as well. So that's how I got into it.
And just meeting you for the first time, I never would have guessed that was who you were, because that's not how you come across. You come across very calm, very humble, that your energy doesn't present the before you at all. Can I ask a little bit about, was it from your upbringing? Was it from religion? Was it from schooling? What was it that propelled you to live in that world before you shifted?
I mean, I think a lot of it was upbringing, right? I think a lot of the way that we communicate comes from the models that we have in our lives. So, in my household, communication looks very, passive aggressive. It was very judgmental. There's a lot of, anger and repressed anger in those, in conversations that weren't actually being had. So it was a lot of kind of dancing around, trying to figure out what was really being said. And so I think I absorbed a lot of that, or I really felt like that's how you interacted, right? Like that was kind of what relationships look like. And then I also think, some of it did also come from just as you're growing up, you're labeled certain things, and so mine was really kind of more reactionary and like that type of path. But I do think that it was more kind of upbringing and just the environment that I was within. Yeah. And I mean, I love my family. We have great relationships, and communication wise, it was not, I mean, it wasn't aligned with what it looks like for me now. Right. I had to change a lot of what I grew up with. Yeah.
And not to get too off on a tangent, but did the communication changes within yourself help? It obviously helped you change the way you communicate with your family. Did it start changing the way they communicated with each other?
So that's a really interesting question. I think it brought more awareness to how they communicate. And I think with communication to change, there really has to be a willingness to do so. And I think some people find that it is an important piece to practice, and others are really just set, in their ways and have a challenging time changing from that. So I think the awareness is there. I don't know if it's changed their communication style, but it's definitely changed how I interact with them. And so when they interact with me, it's different than it used to be. But when they interact together, it's the same. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. But you make such a good point, because you were looking for something, right? You sought this out. You didn't realize exactly what it would be, but then you discovered something that you could use as a tool and a construct and a new way of life, and really a big mindset shift. And people who often are in this world, they are looking for something, right? They're not, often they're the ones who already are on the path a little bit. So,
right. Yeah. There's a curiosity there. There's a wanting to learn. There's a wanting to, shift and find new ways to do things well. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I've observed is this often happens with people in the business world when they hit that point of crisis, maybe in their job, they are burned out. They start
Yeah.
physically manifesting, the stress, and they realize they have to make a change and a pivot point. Your situation was a little bit different. It was a personal situation. But do you see that in a lot of the people that you work with now?
Yes. Yes. There's usually that moment where the awareness that I can't continue in the same way. Because if I do, then, I will be burnt out. I just had a conversation with a one-to-one today that was saying the same thing. Like if I continue, right, I'll have to probably leave my job. I'll have to go on a retreat for a few weeks, reset myself, figure things out, right? Just because of reaching that place of burnout and not wanting to reach that place, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've taught over 70,000 people at this point. That's, yeah. How has that manifested? Because I imagine you probably were doing something different. Maybe you were in communications before, but not only shifted the way you think, your mindset, but you shifted what you do for a living,
Yeah.
how you're helping people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So before I was an editor, a book editor. And so I would help people develop books. So it was still in, figuring out how to use language to express yourself, right? But very, very different.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was a big change for me. And I think it's, it really all began with writing this one book, How to Communicate Like a Buddhist. And then people were really interested in learning, how do I actually do this? How do I put this into practice? And so then that created the Daily Om course, which brought in, lots and lots of people into my world. And then people were interested in really embodying the practice, right? So really learning, how do you actually work daily to communicate in this way, and how do you make it like your default way? And so that's how I started the training programs. And then the training program then led to, mentorships and things of that sort. And then that then led to workshops within companies and one-to-one work. And so it all kind of grew out of me writing about what I was changing in terms of how I was communicating, and then that resonating with others and them wanting to learn more about it. So it was like the demand created the courses and the trainings and the mentorship and the one-to-ones in the workshops and all of it.
And that's really beautiful to hear, because I think so often we think about what we're solving for ourselves and that we want to offer something to the world, but we haven't market tested necessarily. We haven't gotten the feedback yet. And you got that feedback.
Yeah, it was surprising. I was like, whoa, okay, because I think I didn't know if it would help other people too, until I started seeing that it did. So, yeah.
Well, and I, as you're telling your story, of course, I'm thinking about situations in my own life when I've been on both sides, right? When I've been the more calm person, good communication, and then when I've been in the other side of things, and when I've done that and then immediately regretted it,
Yeah,
as well.
Mm-hmm.
Or later on regretted it because I saw, oh gosh, okay, I see that this was not the right way to interact. This harmed a relationship or harmed other people because I was lashing out. And I'm a big believer that you have to do the work. So again, really excited to have you on. And now more than ever, I mean, I hate saying that because it's such a cliche thing to say, but we see so many examples of poor communication out in the world. People not having these tough situations and not knowing how to interact appropriately or calmly with people who might have very different viewpoints. So is that part of why you decided to write the pause principle?
Yeah, so the pause principle really came out of those in the moment moments, right, that you're talking about, where you lash out or you say something that you don't mean, or you just feel like you didn't show up in the way that you really wanted to, right?
Yeah.
And so much of what was coming out in the work that I was doing in my training program, where a lot of companies were starting to pay for their employees to take my training programs. And so what I was noticing was the need for that in the moment piece, right? So we can plan for difficult conversations. We can try to figure out and, understand, okay, what do we need to talk to, or what is the outcome that we're going for from this conversation? But when you're actually in the heat of it, how do you navigate that moment, right? How do you take all the emotion and the wild sensations that are happening inside, and how do you not give over to them? How do you move it and then access yourself so that then you can speak from that grounded place, from that calm place? And so it came from, how do we acknowledge that we're in this chaotic environment, right? Or in this interaction that might feel chaotic. And how do we keep calm within that so that we can stay in the room and actually have a conversation, not, get to the point where it's impossible to connect through challenge, right?
Yeah.
So it came really from that place, and it's really helpful, because we're not always going to agree, we're not always going to understand, and we can still have a conversation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. This definitely can happen in the workplace, but I think this is also about interpersonal relationships with family members, right? Yeah. Yeah. How has your life changed? I mean, I know it's going to be a number of ways. You probably can't share them all right now, but since you embarked on this journey for yourself, started realizing other people wanted your help and assistance, and have created this new life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I feel like the world became a softer place for me to live in. It became a safer place for me, and it's really made it so that the relationships I do have, I really practice being present in my relationships. I really practice, being patient, being generous. I really practice understanding, when I am heated or when I'm frustrated or when I'm angry, and being able to talk to it in a way that the other person can hear, right? And it's really helped me have different kinds of relationships, being in relationships with people that I probably wouldn't be in relationships with before, right?
Wow.
Just being able to be open to having different kinds of conversations, or, whether that be around, anything really. And I think that for me, it's also brought a lot more happiness, right, into my day to day, because I think most of my interactions come from a different place. It comes from this place of wanting to be helpful, or, being more conscious, or trying to be more intentional. And that changes the way that I interact with everything, right? Because then there's a purpose for the day. Like I begin the day and there's direction.
And I know a lot of people who have mindfulness practices have rituals, if you will, at the beginning of your day. So speaking about the beginning of your day, do you enter the day giving yourself space for meditation, walks? What does that look like for you that others could perhaps take and make their own
Yeah.
for listening?
So for me, in the morning, I'll lay in bed with my eyes closed for a while. I'll be awake, but my eyes will be closed. I usually take 5 long, slow, deep breaths in the morning. I have 2 kids, so I usually get up and I am, when I get them up, that's my time to be like present in those moments of saying good morning and, getting them up for the day. And then my ritual in the morning is I have my cup of, it's just a regular cup that I fill up with water, but it takes a very long time to fill up this cup. It's like a 16-ounce cup. And so when I push the faucet down, that to me is it's a mindful moment because I have to wait. I have a lot of urgency in my body in that moment because I want to get breakfast ready. I want to start making lunch for the kids. And it really forces me to slow down and notice the urgency in my body and to see if I can relax that so I can slow down the moment. So that to me is like a morning ritual that just happens every morning. And then after I, taken my kids to school, that's when I usually make a breakfast and then I take a walk. So my walk in the morning is more of a mindful walking meditation. And I walk twice throughout the day. And those are really my rituals around, mindfulness in that way. And then others I have where I could share so many, but anytime I pull a paper towel off of my paper towel holder, I pay attention to the sound. I pay attention to the feeling in my hands. And at night, after my kids are asleep, I always make myself, whether it's like cacao powder and water or a tea. And that to me is another practice of just slowing down. And then meditation, right? So meditation, now my practice looks really different than it used to. Before I, would meditate twice a day for 20 minutes a day. With having kids, my practice changed. And, now it's really 10 minutes. I meditate 10 minutes. So in the day. But for me, it's a lot of mindful moments throughout, whether it's when I get into my car, I'm paying attention to, what it feels like to move my body into my car and just breaking up the day in terms of, working day, finishing that, taking a few breaths, moving into, picking up my kids and moving on from there. So for me, it really is just daily practice,
What I'm hearing is you are being present in every moment.
Trying, right?
Trying. Yeah. It's because it's so easy to get in the car or to be washing the dishes or whatever it is and be thinking 3 steps ahead instead of just being there.
I really try to just be where I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say I'm also a mom and I make my daughter is a senior in high school, but I still make her breakfast and lunch every day when she's with me. And I think that helps me stay in mindfulness. Just the ritual of making her breakfast, being present with her before she starts her day, getting her off to school, whether I'm driving her, because sometimes she still likes mom to drive. I mean, she'd probably have mom drive her every day if I could, but, or I'm telling her to drive herself. And so you're saying it doesn't have to be an hour in the morning that you are meditating and doing yoga and doing this and doing that. It's about those little moments where you bring yourself back.
Yeah, I believe so. Because I think so in meditation, that idea is right. We kind of see our thoughts and we get distracted and then we bring ourselves back to the present moment. And I think that during the day, we have that opportunity all the time to notice, I'm distracted or I am kind of caught in my thoughts here. And so I'm just going to acknowledge that I'm there and I'm going to guide myself back to the present moment of, what are my hands doing? What are my feet doing? What's my belly doing? And so for me, it really is these mini moments, throughout the day that I really recenter myself into the present moment so that then I can show up in a more calm and kind, honest way, right? It's also paying attention a lot to, in conversation, just the sensation of the body and kind of what's going on with your body in that conversation to understand, am I being conscious here? Am I unconscious? What, kind of how am I shaping it?
Yeah. I'm interested to hear because when you do workshops for organizations, there's 1, 2, maybe a team of people, a committee saying, hey, we want to bring Cynthia in. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody who's going to go through that is ready for it, ready to receive it, or, so do you sometimes find resistance when you do these group activities? And what are some ways that you've been able to help people overcome that resistance and feel at least a little shift by the end of your time together?
Yeah. I mean, there definitely can be resistance, right? Especially, within when I'm teaching around the pause principle, which is to soften, that can be really challenging because, you know, most people associate softening with like weakness, right? And but really for us to be able to have difficult conversations, we have to let our armor down, right? Like we have to put it down so that we can find that calm so that then we can actually connect. So sometimes there is resistance to the mindfulness piece, right? And a lot of people just don't want to like zen out, but that's not really what it does. What it does is it helps you be more of who you are, right? In a way that other people can hear and can understand. And so what happens a lot of the times in the workshops is there will be, kind of, a lot of questions, maybe a lot of, questioning, right? And I believe that it's just about playing around, right? This is just about experimenting with something. And so it's not about taking what I'm saying and, implementing every single thing that I'm saying. It's about taking the pieces that resonate and just playing around and seeing what happens, right? Seeing what happens when you start to notice, the sensation in your body and talking to it differently in that moment, noticing and playing around with being present in a conversation and thinking kindly about the person that you're connecting with, right? Playing around with using silence more as a way to bring you closer in a conversation as opposed to, farther apart. And so I think when people start understanding, okay, this is kind of something I can experiment with, then they're more open to seeing what happens, right? And what I notice is that, there are a lot of people who aren't open to everything, and that's okay. And they walk away changed, right? In the sense that they walk away having tools and practices that they can use in certain moments that they never thought they would have used before. And how great is that? It's just one more thing that they can add to help them.
Absolutely. And I think one of these big tips probably is, we, in the workplace as well as home. I mean, in every situation, you can have disagreements with people, and people, as we know, especially on social media, become really impassioned about their viewpoints. Or in the workplace, somebody says something that's diametrically opposed to, maybe it's politics, but maybe it's also just the way that you think something should be accomplished at work. How do we stay present and come listening and not just judging and, you know, trying to find a place of agreement or commonality with somebody in those situations?
Well, I think, the biggest piece is really knowing that you can start to see someone through a different lens, right? So at first, what happens within us is we feel attacked in some way or we feel threatened in some way, and we feel this need to protect ourselves or defend ourselves. And when we can just start to notice and become aware, okay, that's what's happening right now for me. I'm feeling really attacked. I'm feeling that I need to react in like a more challenging kind of way, right? That awareness is your first step. It really is like the cue to know, okay, now what I need to do, I need to pull in a practice that's going to be able to help me calm that sensation so that I'm not in that heightened state. So that could be either, finger tapping, like tapping your fingers. It could be even just like rubbing your ear. It could be just like rubbing your chest. But, finding something, a practice that will just calm your nervous system so that then you can actually look at the person as a human being, right? You look at them through a lens of, wanting to be helpful to this person and really asking yourself, how can I be helpful to this person? Or how can I be patient with this person? Or, there's something good here. Like something good is underneath this, right? And so it's in that moment, can I find that something good that I can connect with? And usually, there is that peace within all of us. I was just talking today to one of my one-to-ones, and she said something so beautiful. She was like, just underneath it all, we're all just beating hearts. And it's true. And so it's like, if in that moment of discord and disappointment or disagreement, we can look at that person and see them less as the other and less as the enemy in that moment, and more as somebody that has a beating heart, that can we just talk to that can be helpful, right?
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. You do so much. How do you fit it all in a day? How do you balance your schedule so that you can stay in mindfulness, that you can help people, but then you're also really present for your family and your loved ones?
Yeah. So I am very intentional with how I schedule my time. I know if I have 4 or 5 calls a day, I am not a happy person. I am not good for the people that I am talking to or my family, right? So I know, like the max for me during the day is 3 calls.
Mm.
And so I only book that in my calendar, right? And so I know that I have a good working window, and when I am in that working window, I am 100% present and able to be there for each person or each group that I'm working with. And I have very clear boundaries in that I really know in the morning, like, this is my time with myself, with my kids. Once they're in school, then I come home and, I transition into like the working day. And then that, 2:33 p.m. period comes, and it's like, all right, my work is done for the day. I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to leave that where it is. And I'm going to transition into the later part of the day. And then my intention is to be present in those moments. Right. And so it's just constantly keeping myself accountable, right? And keeping myself present with shifting gears.
Mm.
And like, being unconscious to me is probably one of the scariest things, because I felt like I was unconscious for the majority of my life, up to the point where I became aware that I could interact differently, or I could use my language differently, or I could, be the architect, so to speak, of my day. And so I want to take control in that way, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. I think that's such a good reminder to all of us that you don't have to be the person who's overscheduled and overwhelmed by your schedule. And it can be easy to get into that space if you don't mindfully go into your schedule. I mean, I know we had an interaction, I think yesterday, where we had accidentally booked two interviews. So that was a great example. And this conversation comes at a time when I have transitioned back to working for myself. And I do also teach university, but I already know that schedule and what's set. But I've had to look at, okay, what is that schedule versus my day schedule, so that I can make sure I have time to be intentional with my students, with grading, with making sure if I'm teaching late and then having to drive home and not getting home till 11 o'clock at night, that the next day I'm not overwhelming myself with meeting other tasks. But it's not easy to do.
It's not. And I mean, it is. And it's also, we can talk to ourselves so that we continue that, right? We can tell ourselves that we actually don't have time to even make time, right? And it's hard. I'll talk with people and say, what I want you to do, I just want you to put 5 to 10 minutes between meetings. And it's like, no, I can't. Like, I can't do that. And I'm like, you can. Because once you start putting it in, you start training other people, right? And you start training yourself. And I think that that's a big piece. It's also the work that you're doing. When you have limited amount of time that you give yourself to do the work, you do better work, right? If you give yourself more time, it's like, I mean, it just spreads out. It's like, I could do this for this many minutes and this over here. but it's the same thing with creativity. I feel like, if you limit yourself, you become more creative. And so a lot of it isn't about doing more, it's about doing less. And in that less time, you're actually doing more.
Mhm. I think for people who are entrepreneurs or small business owners, that's probably one of the hardest things to face is that we do need to scale down. We need to, niche down, and really it does give you so much more room to be creative
Yeah.
and to go really deep instead of be really narrow across a whole bunch of things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think that maybe it has iterations, right? Maybe in the beginning when you're first starting out, it feels like there's so much urgency in every area, and having to be present in this area and then in this area and this area. And, over time being able to step back and really observe what is really efficient here. Like, is this area really helping me grow? Or is this area for my ego? Is this area for, right? So starting to really discern what is helpful, like what is really moving you forward, and does it align with your intentions for what you really want this to feel like for you,
Yeah. What is your biggest wish for yourself, your organization right now?
I think my biggest wish is for people to start paying attention to how they communicate, right? I mean, really, like, paying attention to their language and understanding how much power they have over their relationships, right? Over themselves. Once we start really paying attention to using language that's helpful, then everything becomes just so much easier, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think my biggest wish is for people to understand that it's a learned practice, and that just because, up to this point, maybe it's always looked a certain way, it doesn't always have to look that way, right? And I also, I think the other piece too is hoping for people to understand that creating more space, like creating more stillness, creating more moments of quiet,
Mm-hmm.
really help you move forward. It's actually necessary for you to move forward and be successful, because those are the moments where you're actually checking in with yourself to know if you're following the path that you want to be on, right? And so, yeah, I think that, those would kind of be what I would wish for. Yeah.
Is there a piece of advice or something you wish you could tell your old self?
Mm. I mean, I would probably just say to keep doing what you're doing, like keep going, right? Because I think all the experiences and all the things that I went through have led me to here. Right. So there's nothing I would change going back, because it all brought me to this point,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're obviously going to link to you, your work, your book. But Cynthia, I'd love to hear, do you have a favorite quote, mantra, verse, poem, family motto that you'd like to share?
Yes. So I really love the Deepak Chopra quote that is, do you want to be a prisoner of your past or a pioneer of your future? That to me is something I think about a lot. So
Something great for us all to think about right now in this moment. I feel so calm and at peace, but also excited after this conversation. So thank you for bringing that and your wisdom, your story, your journey, and some things that we can all think about as we're listening to this episode.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you to everybody who is listening or watching this episode. I hope that you take a pause and a moment for yourself so that you can look at what you're doing, look at if you're building that space to be intentional, to be mindful about your actions, your words, your deeds, and to remember to take those pauses. And with that, I'll be back again with another amazing guest to share their story and their journey very shortly. Until then, have a beautiful day. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.